Here are 5 deer habitat management chores that you can be doing right now to improve the deer habitat on your property this winter. And spoiler alert, they all involve running a chainsaw. Well, I can't do a winter habitat project video without talking about cutting and bedding areas. I mean, look at this. This spot used to be wide open spaces until the chainsaw came in here and took care of that. And you can see, we got a good trail cutting out that way. I got a trail weaving down through there, trail over there, trail that cuts up there. I mean, the deer are in this stuff. This is the type of work that can be an absolute game changer for you when it comes to your fall hunting success. When you break out the chainsaw and you tell the deer where to bed, it just creates a much more predictable scenario for your hunting in the fall. You can see here, big old deer bed right there. And what do we have? We have cover all the way around, but this is also a point. So the deer feels like they have the advantage where they can look out over the valley and have a feeling of security behind them. I created this with a chainsaw. This did not exist without the chainsaw. When we cut in bedding areas, it puts the cover back in the deer's face and it gives them a feeling of security. They do not want it bed in big, wide open woodlots. This right here is what the deer want. They want high stem count cover that's right in their face. And from a hunting standpoint, these are the spots that the bucks are going to be during the rut. We create these areas with the does in mind. You can see, look at all those rubs right in there. So I'm thinking doe bedding, because creating buck bedding is just it's a really tough feat. But bucks bed in a multitude of different locations for a multitude of different reasons. But doe bedding is predictable. And when we create predictable doe bedding, the bucks will respond, and then we know how to hunt them accordingly during the rut, because we know exactly where the bucks are going to be. They want to be where the girls are at, and when we tell the girls where that they need to hang out, we can hunt the bucks because we know what areas they're going to want to be cruising. And I got a nice heavy trail cutting through here. It's a big piece of this. We're creating these bedding areas, is creating predictable lines of movement through them. And that right there is where we can set the trap on our buck during the rut. And this whole area is just shredded. And this is where the bucks wanted to hang out during the rut. And it was made with a chainsaw. And you can look, just as you look through here, there aren't a lot of hinge trees. Now, I love hinge cutting trees, but there's just not a lot of trees that hinge great in Minnesota. I think box elder and elm hinge really well. Basswood hinge okay. And ash are kind of marginal. The smaller ash you can hinge, but once they get bigger, they can get risky. So it's best to flush cut those. But most of this in here, you can see there's a hinge tree right there. I think we had an elm right there growing. Got a whole new trunk coming out of that one. That one could almost get re-hinged here. But most of this was made just by coming in with a chainsaw, flush cutting trees, and doing exactly that. Big, wide open spaces. And now we have tons and tons of cover and just an absolute cow trail cutting through here, because this is where the deer want to be, because it's security, it's browse, it's food in the winter. But this is by far the biggest feeling of security for them in the fall, because all the cover's right in their face. So I'm starting off with bedding cuts, because this is the thing where you actually will get deer to hold up on your property. You can put the best food in the world on your property, but if you don't have a feeling of security on your property, the deer aren't going to hang out there. But if you have this, what you can see behind me, This is what's going to get deer to hold up on your property, and this is how you can change it for the better. So starting off with the bedding cuts, because this is what absolutely transformed our property and has transformed the property of many of my clients as far as being able to hold deer and give deer a feeling of security on their own land. Here's another real easy one that you can do, and it's go into your mature woodlot, which this down through here is an old growth forest, and you cut your mid-story trees. So you can see here I got an ironwood that sprouted back. Now this was cut probably, there's the stump right there. It's cut probably 2 winters ago. And what I did is I just came in here with a tank of gas and I just started knocking down some of these mid-story trees. Now your mid-story trees are often, at least up here in Minnesota, it's normally ironwood or soft or hard maple. And what they tend to do is they take over that mid-story of the woods and they rob all that sunlight that could be hitting the forest floor. They canopy over and it's just pure shade and there's nothing growing underneath. So you can see in this spot, now there's a maple that was cut down. For the most part, it was just these mid-story trees that were cut out. And now we're actually getting some sunlight in here and you can see all the stems that are coming. Now the other benefit is, because these are fairly shade tolerant, if you do still have a pretty dense canopy, these ironwoods will still sprout back. They hold their leaves late, so they actually have a little bit of a thermal cover component to them, but they do provide good viable structure even if you're in an area that has a denser canopy. I mean, here's what this spot looked like before. And you can see there's just no cover underneath here. There are a bunch of little stems coming up, I think mostly maple, but they just grow a few inches and they die back. But if you look up, if I were to cut these mid-story trees out of here, I'd be able to punch some decent little holes in the canopy, start to get some sunlight in here, and actually get a little bit of regeneration. So there's more of a security component to this, and maybe even some potential bedding. But for sure, I would get more browse for the deer. You can see a spot right here where some ironwood's cut. If we look up, still a pretty good canopy. But they're coming back, and eventually they'll get 4, 5, 6 feet tall and create almost like a little bush. And this will be decent, viable cover in here. Now, if you don't own the property that you're hunting, a lot of times this is the type of cutting that landowners will let you do because you are improving the health of the forest by getting some sunlight down in there and releasing your big mature trees. You know, if you tell them that you just want to cut it, go in and cut the junk that's growing around their nice big trees, a lot of times they'll let you do that. So this could be a really good option for you if you don't own the property that you're hunting. I also really like doing this type of cutting on bad winters because this is a great way to feed the deer. What I'll do is I'll go into a spot kind of like this one behind me, and I'll just bring 1 tank of gas. About every 10 days I'll go and do some kind of general TSI, knock down my mid-story trees and feed the deer, and you'll see it within hours. The deer will find those downed trees and you'll be feeding them with the chainsaw. Here's an example of what the ironwoods will eventually turn into. You can see these are all growing off the stumps. There are a few that ended up dying. The deer browse them back and they kill them. So I don't end up treating any of these. I let them all come back. I let the deer kill some, and I let some grow back. And eventually I'll just come in and I'll reset them with my chainsaw again. So yeah, it's a little bit of work, but you know, once you cut a tree, that successional clock starts ticking. So eventually you got to add in some disturbance again just to keep that good cover at the deer's level. But right now this is still working for me, but in a few years I'll probably start resetting some of these. Here's another one that's really fun to do, and it's just easy cutting, and that's opening up your mast producing trees. So you can see here I got 4 bur oaks, and I had a big old basswood that was towering over all 4 of them. So what I did is I came in, knocked it down. Now all of a sudden these 4 aren't competing with that basswood anymore for sunlight. And actually what I'll probably end up doing is I'm going to pick my best tree, which will likely be, I'll probably get rid of that one and I'll save, well, I don't know. I'll let them go for a little while, but I will cut one of these trees out of here and I'll leave my best 2 so that they're not competing with each other, and give them their best chance at actually producing acorns. You can see even next to this one I had a dead tree, so I cut that out of there. I don't want anything touching the crown of the tree I'm trying to promote. Now what a forester will tell you to do is they'll say if you got, let's say that's probably about a 9-inch tree, you'd cut everything 9 feet around it. I do that as well as cut anything that's touching the crown of the tree that I want to enhance or promote. Sometimes we even got to cut oaks to help our oaks. You can see there's a couple oaks that I hinged over right there because I want, this tree is just beautiful. I wanted to promote that tree and that tree. I'll watch and see what they're doing, and there could be a point I would maybe get rid of one of them, but they both look like really healthy trees, so there's a good chance they'll both stay. But now they actually have a real chance at kicking out a ton of acorns because I gave that crown room to stretch. It doesn't have these other 2 subordinate oaks competing with it. So sometimes we have to cut oaks to help our oaks. Just know that if you're in an area with oak wilt, you want to make sure you're doing any cutting on oaks outside of that oak wilt window. Here in Minnesota, our oak wilt window is April to July. So I don't do any cutting on oak trees during that time. That's why the winter is a fantastic time to open up our oaks. There's a big beautiful red oak that I completely opened up. It had like 3 basswoods growing around it. And then there's a bur oak right there. Now this one, I don't know if it's going to have a chance at acorns or not. A lot of times when you get these trees that are kind of bent like a J, they're probably not going to produce an acorn, but it was a Lone Ranger out here, so I figured I'd give it a chance. And that's really cool. This whole side of that oak tree didn't have any branches on it, but I got rid of the basswood, and look at all those stems that are starting to stretch. So when we have more stems on the oak tree, that equals more acorns. That's what MSU Deer Lab found, is that when we release the crown competition around our oaks, we can increase that acorn production by up to 50%, because more stems equals more acorns. Now, releasing mass-producing trees, it doesn't just have to be oaks. I've been on properties with wild apple trees, so you can certainly open those up in the winter. If you're in the Midwest or South, if you got persimmon, that'd be a great one to open up in the winter. Crab apples, on a lot of wild crab apples. So yeah, if you have something that the deer want that produces a fruit or some hard mast, this is a great time to bust out the saw, open that tree up, and get it kicking out even more food for your deer. Edge feathering is probably one of the easiest habitat management tactics that you can employ on your property this winter. You can see here this edge was edge feathered probably 4 or 5 years ago, and it's thick all the way along this entire edge. Before, you could see right into this chunk of timber, but what I did is I came in and I tipped all the trees out, and I got 2 big beautiful oaks right there. I left my mass producing trees along the edge and tipped everything out and created a visual barrier between the woods and the open part of our property right here. I really like edge feathering in the winter because what ends up happening then is I create a browse line all the way along my woods edge. Now this is very, very easy for the deer to access all these trees that I tipped out, and they can walk right along this edge and browse. And normally woody browse is the predominant form of food for the deer up here in the winter. Now we're starting out really, really mild again, 2nd year in a row. I'm not complaining about that. But on a normal winter, they would already be smashing this edge in the form of browse. You can actually see on this where it was probably browsed in years past. There's some old browse right there. And we got some new growth that was kicking out at the end. Looks like it died. And there's a little bit of old browse right there. So yeah, this, when you tip them out like that, it creates a nice, easy way for the deer to access that woody browse, and also creates that visual barrier so that the deer can't see in to the woods, and the deer that are bedded in the woods can't see out. So it just adds a higher level of security to your property. You can see these trees that I edge feathered. I did hinge what I could hinge. A lot of these were box elders, and I hinged them. I tipped them out. You can see all the sprouting that's coming off that stump. I'll probably give it a few more years, and what I'll do is I'll recut this edge and double down on that screening, because eventually this is all gonna kind of outgrow its benefits, so I'll have to reset it with the chainsaw again. You can see tons of sprouting coming right there. This tree, it looks like, actually no, it is growing all the way out to the end here, even though it looks like the trunk looks dead, but you can see my new growth coming off the end there. So I like to be able to hinge cut the trees if they hinge. Not every species is great for hinging, like I've talked about. Box elder are. So I hinge these out, tip them out, and create that awesome visual barrier. And this is super easy cutting to do. I love doing this type of cutting, especially in the winter. And last but certainly not least, if you have woody invasives on your property, the winter is a great time to go after your seed trees and stop the bleeding. You can see here I got buckthorn, and it's just loaded with berries. And I need to kill this thing so that I can stop the spread on our property. Now, I have been battling this stuff ever since I got into habitat management work out here. But I always seem to find it in different spots. It seems like once you have it, you never fully get rid of it. But that doesn't mean that there's not a massive benefit to killing it and knocking it back and keeping it in check. So I am going to get in here. This one seed tree I found, literally the only seed tree in this entire area. I'll get in here, and what I'll do is I'll cut that stump, and I'm going to treat it. My treatment regimen for buckthorn is 25% triclopyr, 75% diesel, and then I always put a splash of applicator dye in so I can see that I coat the trunk. So what I do is I cut it, have my squirt bottle, I'll coat the entire trunk in my 25% triclopyr, 75% diesel solution, and that tree will die, and I will no longer have it spreading its nastiness all over our property. So if you have woody invasives, the winter is a great time to get at it. Stop the bleeding on your property, and I promise you it's worth it. I've got spots that were just rank with buckthorn, and now there's just a sprig of buckthorn here or there. You can see the native plants being released in these areas, and there is far more deer traffic in them than there was before with the buckthorn. Buckthorn creates a deer desert. The only time I ever see deer using buckthorn is in a situation where it is literally the only cover in the entire area, like isolated woodlots out in western Minnesota. For the most part, deer do not use buckthorn. Native is always best. Release or get rid of the buckthorn, release your native shrubs and native seedbed, and it is absolutely worth the effort. So as always, thanks for watching the video. Hopefully you found it helpful. I do have a lot of playlists on my channel that deal with bedding cuts and TSI and edge feathering, invasive management, all that stuff. So if you do want more information on that, feel free to check those out. Otherwise, you all take care. God bless.